evening. Thank you so much for staying around for our panel, which will start in just a moment. But first, I'd like to, before I introduce our panel, let me take a moment for a few important thank yous for this evening and this weekend. First, thanks to the Dayton Performing Arts Alliance's Diamond and Impresario members whose steadfast support makes possible everything that we do at your Dayton Philharmonic, Dayton Alhambra, and Dayton Ballet. They are the AES Ohio Foundation, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, the Kettering Family Foundation, the Shevitz Foundation, the Harry A. Toolman Jr. and Virginia B. Toolman Fund of the Dayton Foundation, the Charles D. Berry Foundation, Paul and Dolores Anderson, Dr. Ingrid Brown and Dr. Joy Tyner, Peter and Patricia Torbeck, Stephen Lou Mason, and the Miriam Rosenthal Foundation for the Arts. Please join me in thanking all of them. And also special thanks to major supporters of this weekend's performances, the Charles F. Kettering Foundation and the Olive Kettering Endowment Fund, supporting the appearance of Kayla Odera and Ben Taylor as this season's Olive W. Kettering Endowed guest artists. Now please welcome our panel and moderator, Reverend Joshua Ward, Senior Pastor of Dayton's Omega Baptist Church.
All right, good evening. Thank you all for sticking around for this important panel discussion that we are going to share here together by way of introduction. As Mr. Gittleman mentioned, I am Joshua Ward, the Senior Pastor of Omega Baptist Church, but also double duty here tonight. I serve, and I'm honored to serve, as the Secretary of the Dayton Performing Arts Alliance Board of Trustees. Tonight's concert has certainly been a powerful, moving, and courageous experience. And I know that for many of us, it has been incredibly evocative as well. Some of us may be feeling sadness, pain, anger, frustration, while some of us have simply come to a new realization and awareness of these important American stories lifted up through the 7 last words of the Unarmed. I do want to stress that these are American stories, that no amount of discrediting critical race theory, that no amount of disavowing diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and initiatives can erase the fact that these stories, as painful as they are true, that they need to be told and retold, that the lives of these men deserve to be honored. As planning for this evening's performance began, we knew that it might stir up these and other feelings and emotions within us, and thus felt it prudent to allow some space for reflecting and processing the stories lifted up in our feature composition, The 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. Tonight we have invited 4 panelists, experts in their respective fields, to guide us through this process a bit. And I will introduce them as we invite them to share their insights. Our first question is for our artistic director, conductor, and the visionary behind tonight's concert, a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Neal Gittleman. Mr. Gittleman, while this discussion will be focused mainly on the 7 last words of the Unarmed, I want to ask if you can speak a bit to your vision to bring these specific compositions together for this evening's performance. How do these works align and speak to one another from your perspective?
It's interesting that you say speak to one another. Because
I got that from Dr. Dorf last night.
But it's wonderful because that when a conductor creates a program, that's often what you're looking for, is that putting pieces together which connect in some way, which have some sort of dialogue between them. And sometimes that dialogue is inherent in the pieces, and sometimes it's just there. It happens organically as you listen to the music. I chose the 3 pieces to go around the 7 last words of the Unarmed by Joel Thompson. I chose them with the idea of creating an emotional journey from joy with a little bit of sadness mixed in, to sadness and all of the emotions that come up of a sad evening by Lili Boulanger. And then the myriad of emotions that you get from Joel's piece. And then the Fauré, which is, for the most part, comforting. And so I was thinking about the arc of the entire evening to and through Joel's piece, and then hopefully bringing people to a point at the end of the performance where they could be in a space where they could process what they experienced. That we didn't leave them in that intense emotion, but gave a chance to recover from it. And whether you people left and will do that reflection at home, or are here for some more, and then we'll reflect at home. It certainly, from the audience's response, it felt like it worked. It'll be interesting for me because when you're on the podium, you can't experience the piece the way the audience does. You're too involved in everything you have to do to make sure it happens the way it's supposed to. So I'll be really looking forward to listening to these performances as we're preparing them for a radio broadcast. I think it's in May. And that will give me a chance then to hear it sort of as you did. But I was very pleased with the affect of the evening as I could judge it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our next question is for Dr. Sam Dorf. Dr. Dorf is a teacher, scholar, artist, parent, husband, and advocate. He is the Alumni Endowed Chair in the Humanities and Professor of Music at the University of Dayton. As a scholar, he often writes about music and dance relations, and music and the ancient world. He currently serves as the treasurer of the American Musicological Society and sits on the boards of the Dayton Performance Arts Alliance and the Anti-Defamation League's Cleveland office. Dr. Dorf, my initial question for you this evening is to ask if you can speak a little bit to the power of music. Music has been an indispensable part of most significant movements throughout history. I think of the civil rights movement of the last century in our country and the freedom songs that formed a soundtrack of sorts, which protesters were taught and boldly sung as they fought for justice and liberation. Can you speak a bit to the significance of music in the work of social justice and uplift from oppression?
Thank you for that wonderful question, and thanks everyone for being here this evening. I'm not sure I have the right answer for you, because I don't think music's that powerful in and of itself, right? Like, looking out at this audience, I see people, like I see our mayor, I see people from our county commission, you guys can create legislation, but music cannot create legislation, right? People can create justice, but music does not bring justice. So music has a weird role, right? As this kind of catalyst or this extra thing that can help us, right? So when I think about music and its power to create social change, I think about these sort of three things it can do. One is that it can inform us, it can tell a story. And I think the work by Joel Thompson tells a story for us. It can also memorialize something. And Thompson's work also memorializes, but you can also think of Fauré Requiem as a work that memorializes people. Just a quick aside about Fauré, he wrote this he first started writing it in the 1880s, 1890s, when he was an organist at a church in Paris. And as a church organist, his job was to play for funerals. In the 1880s, he was playing over 300 funerals a year. 300, and this is before antibiotics, before vaccines, and so most of those were children. So to think about, right, that role that he had to do day in and day out, performing music to memorialize people, they're really important. And then the last is to galvanize, right? We definitely see that both in the Thompson, encouraging us to go out there and create change. But we also in many ways hear it in Lili Boulanger's work, especially the last part, these thundering booms from the bass drums, from the brass. And remember, this is a piece written during World War I, a time of great trauma, a time of great change. So yeah, I think those are the three things it can do. And unfortunately, it cannot create justice, and it cannot pass laws.
That's good. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is for Mrs. Sierra Leone. Sierra is an incredibly accomplished and highly respected artist and community leader. She is the executive director and co-founder of the Home of Urban Creative Arts and has received innumerable awards, recognitions, and titles as a result of her work. Most recently, she was appointed to a 2-year term as the City of Dayton's inaugural Poet Laureate at the beginning of February. Mrs. Leone, as our city's newly minted Poet Laureate, can you speak to the power and importance of storytelling, particularly painful, difficult, and controversial stories from the margins of society?
Yes, and good evening, everyone. Great question. I have to talk with you about your response. Because music, as my grandmother would say, she would say, she'll tell you how music is, how she got over, how those songs stopped people from hurting other people, how that music is how they found a way through, a joy, as Toy Derricott would say, is pure resistance. That's what Black joy is. This resistance. And so I do believe in what you said, but Joel, he said he's fighting for justice one note at a time. But very, very true. And music cannot do those things, but I've seen it do so much and heal so many people. And so I just wanted to add to. I know this is what you do for a living. You know what I mean? So please, I know this is, what you do. So don't come for me when you get the mic. But I do believe that storytelling is a universal metaphor Beyond storytelling having the ability to convey knowledge or to build connections and explore the human condition, it's fundamentally the center story is of our need to belong. And tonight, you all, this is our second time seeing this piece and sitting with it and grappling with our own personal reflections. And tonight, I must say that I almost experienced this through a lens of apathy, just sort of sitting and looking and originally, I'm watching someone that is not my exact, or a group of people who are not my exact reflection, speaking to something that pierced the soul of community. But then I realized after, we went to dinner last night and we talked and talked and talked, and just that very thought of Dunbar's sympathy, right? This notion of sorrow. And for him, he leans a lot on Dunbar in his work. And so, but I realized that the very thing that he said he wants us to do more than anything with this work is listen. And so it is in that tonight where I grew and the I can't breathe piece was happening. And the way that it lingered on like breath, like community, like who we are together, that is where we can find the empathy, right? That is where we can center ourselves in a deep understanding and appreciation for the work no matter who is performing it. And that's an epiphany for me, over and over again, seeing this piece, and I would love to see it again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Final panelist is Dr. Rosalyn Brown Beatty. Dr. Rosalyn Brown Beatty, often referred to as Dr. Roz, in the field is a licensed professional counselor and the owner of Brown Beatty Counseling and Consulting. She has experience in trauma-informed therapy and grief counseling, often known for her passion of speaking and teaching about mental health. Her purpose is to make sure that everyone has the opportunity and the tools to live their life to their fullest potential and have experiences of joy even when life continues to happen. Dr. Roz, would you please share a bit about trauma, how it affects us, and more specifically, how these stories lifted up tonight may have impacted many African Americans from a trauma-informed perspective?
First of all, good evening. Even as I am sitting here, I am looking at the faces, but also feeling the energy of people here. And I know that this piece can be a very heavy piece, but a real lived experience. And so, as we were listening to this, through the tears that we may have shed, through the thoughts that may have come up, this is where trauma also can show up. And so we're going to do a really quick little lesson about trauma. You'll never forget this, I promise. So everybody put your hand up like this. This right here is our hand brain. This is the part that we all know that's in our head. Our brain makes all the decisions. But if we flip our hands up, right here, this is our amygdala. It's where our trauma brain lives. This is the part that says, I need to make sure that my person survives, no matter what. And so think about like in the kitchen, there is smoke coming from the kitchen. And you say, uh-oh, it's a fire. I need to go in with the fire hose, the firemen and women, the buckets of water. I gotta put the fire out. But sometimes it's just a grilled cheese that needs to be moved to the other burner. But This also remembers the time that there was a fire. So guess what? Your trauma brains got activated today. And so some people probably remembered watching the news, seeing the clips. This was like, uh-oh, I gotta be online, we gotta survive. Some people like me, when I heard that, Mama, I'm going to college, and it hit me very differently the second time listening to this today and watching it today. And I was like, oh, my trauma brain is online, and so are my tears. And so again, this was saying, how do you survive? This comes up when we experience, when we hear, when we see things that remind us of different fires. Now put your hand back down. What we want to come online is the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part that says, the decision making, I'm going to make the best decision for your long-term survival. This just cares about the here and now. But one of the cool things is that music, it fans the flame away and puts this back online. So even as you think about, like the way that it was composed, I love that you sandwiched it in. Because if not, we were going to leave you all like this when you will walk out, and you're going to be sad, you're going to be upset, you're going to be angry, and lots of feelings could have came up. And so even when we heard that other piece, it was like, okay, we're going to slowly bring this down, so then when we were talking, and we're talking at you, this part can actually hear. And because guess what? The language center turns off right here. So side note to parents, when you're talking to your kids and they're looking at you, kind of like dumbfounded with the deer in headlights look, their trauma brain is online, they can't communicate.
Thank you so much. So I'm actually going to stick with you, Dr. Ross, for this next question. And it's connected somewhat to your answer for the last question, but how can we, I guess, more healthily or effectively deal with trauma when it comes up? What steps can I take when I'm experiencing a very traumatic moment or sentiment? And I want to ask kind of a part two as well. How can we more sensitively engage with others, with co-workers, friends, neighbors, family members who may be experiencing trauma that we do not feel ourselves, particularly around sensitive and controversial subjects like tonight's experience?
And so with trauma, some of the things that we can do first are somatic things. And so one, even think about your breathing. Because remember, when this is up, our language center isn't there. And so be able to, one, put your hand on your belly, not your chest, because we want to breathe from the diaphragm. And say, okay, how am I breathing? Am I breathing through here? Do I feel my belly moving in and out when I'm breathing? If you don't, guess what? This is probably online. And that first step we're going to do, we're going to do some deep breathing. And we may even do it right now since we're at it. So one, we're going to inhale for 3. We're going to hold for 3. And then we're going to exhale for 3. Sorry, it's a counselor and a counselor educator with me. So I'm going to have you guys participate that first. And so one, I'm going to count us through. Hands on your belly so you can feel it too and make sure you're doing it right. Inhale, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, exhale, 2, 3. We'll do it one more time. Inhale, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, exhale, 2, 3. So then when we have our thinking brain back online, the next thing that we can do for trauma is for looking for someone. Who's around you? Who can you speak to? Maya Angelou has a very great quote that says, "There's no greater agony than an untold story inside." Trauma can continue to grow and fester if you keep keeping it inside of you. And so look for those pieces of those people that you can talk to and that can hold a space for you. Now, one, go to therapy because therapists do that. But then also see, like, who are the like-minded people? Whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's someone you met on social media. Take that moment and process with them. And how can we continue to hold space? By sharing and connecting with each other. Healing happens in community. I'll say that again. Healing happens in community. And so the events like this is also for healing to be able to happen. And then the last thing I'll just say is continue to speak the names that need to be remembered. Continue to tell their stories. Don't let that die. You continue their story, you continue their legacy. And yes, we may see that in music, but we also see that through you using your voice and sharing.
Thank you so much. In that same vein, I want to address this question to you, Mrs. Lamb, initially, but also hope that our other panelists might offer some insight and guidance on it as well. And it's this: what can I do? I'm sitting here in the audience tonight. I have experienced this powerful evening, but I want to do something. I'm inspired to get active and involved. This piece was composed in 2015. And there are several more pages of names to add to the list, unfortunately. What is something practical that I can do tomorrow and in the days thereafter to make an impact in my community?
I do thank you for the question, and I believe, as you said, we are never forgotten. We will live forever as long as folks are calling our names. And you only die when you're not spoken of anymore. And I believe he wrote this piece not for us to center ourselves in self-indulgent emotions or guilt or whatever, but he wrote it as a contribution to humanity. And that humanity extends beyond melanin, like James Baldwin said. I do believe our city is doing a lot, but there is always more that can be done. But things that are off the top of my head and I'm just really thinking about, we do have the Cure Violence Global program that's coming online in the community with Mayor Mims, Darius, the commissioners. They're putting together a program that will be based here. And if you want to get involved or volunteer, please do. There's plenty of work and support needed. I spoke this week at the Literacy Bronner Center, and they're looking for support for volunteers. If you have a skill, go over and help and support folks who are integrating new folks into the community because they're preparing for a workforce 10, 20 years down the road. I do believe Julio has a program as well that he's a part of. And it's a human rights program where they're tackling the barriers that are faced with everyday community members. He's a Charles F. Kettering fellow, and he's in the audience as well. So you can chop it up with him, chat with him about the human rights, the police reform work they're doing, the Sunshine Week that's coming up next week, and they also have like a human rights art program that they have in place. We have an amazing world of arts, this program, that's being put on right now, organizations that are here, DCDC, over on West Third, we have visual arts with Baba Bean and Paint. We have the Omega CDC, right? That's right here, holding it down with amazing programs all throughout the year to support community. My organization, Signature Educational Solutions, who's offering programs as well to support in a summer camp for youth 14 to 19 with music and creative arts. We have a hub, we have maker spaces, libraries. There are so many ways to get involved. But I would say to you first, reflect on what you've experienced here. I mean, seriously, sit down and reflect on it. As I said to the audience last night, we're doing the very thing they said we can't do right now in America. And that's sitting in the room with all different types of people. We're doing it right now. We did it yesterday. Anyone else participating, we'll do it over and over again. And so you can reflect on this experience. But I'll tell you something, arm yourself with education. It's just like with my children. They can look up everything on Google except for what I need them to look up. Right? I mean, everything. I mean, can get all the answers to everything they want to do. But what we need to do when we're talking about the apathy, the empathy, right? And the sympathy. Do your homework. Don't just run off interacting with people. Figure out what's going on in the world. Turn off the social media. Pick up a book. And I have a list if there's time for me to share. Engage in some discourse with community. Check out sites. You know, the Charles F. Kettering Foundation has a website full of information around being a part of a democratic society. It's out here. Tell someone in this room about a podcast they don't know. Give them a book idea. Socialize. Talk to the human beings you're with and around. This is how we do the work. What we're doing right now with Neal, Patrick, and their team. This is how it's done.
Thank you so much. Dr. Dorf,
Yeah. Just a few parting thoughts. One is music isn't bad. Music does help. I should say that. But I think the important thing is that music alone is not very helpful. Music requires people. The hundreds of people on this stage that we're creating for you and the hundreds of people in the audience, right? Music without people is powerless. And so while music itself cannot create justice, people listening to music absolutely can. And so I recommend, as a musicologist, right, it's my job to make some music recommendations, right? What do you listen to next? I think the playlist I came up with last night was still pretty good. Listen to some Nina Simone, right? Not just, I know, right? Not just Strange Fruit, her soul-crushing performance of Soul, Strange Fruit. But listen to Young, Gifted, and Black. Mississippi Goddamn. And Kendrick Lamar too. Pulitzer Prize-winning author, musician. And I've been thinking, I mentioned it last night again, but I've been thinking about uniting in grief, right? And that line that we all grieve differently. But we all grieve, right? And I think that reminds us that it's not just about reaching out to the folks in our communities, but as someone who lives in Oakwood, it is also incredibly important for all of us to get outside of our bubbles, to move and spend time and engage in places that you don't feel comfortable, that are a little bit further out. That's how we're going to keep on doing this work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Mr. Gittleman, I will ask if you'd like to speak to that question. I'll invite you to do so, but I have a different question for you to end this tonight. Why? Why this piece? Why was it so important when you called last March and said, I have this idea, Pastor, or what do you think? Why this piece? Why was it so important for you to bring this work to our community?
The simple answer is that when I first heard about this piece, the first thing I wanted to do was really hear it. And when I heard it moved me in a very profound way. And I thought immediately that this is a piece of music our town needs to hear. Especially because of John Crawford being memorialized in it, but not just because of that. Because as I got the music and studied it and heard it and played it, what really struck me about the piece is that what Joel did is he focuses our attention on these 7 people. And these are 7 people who, to the extent that we know about them, and I think the only one where I hadn't heard the story was Kenneth Chamberlain, the first one. All the others I knew about in some way, from the news or from social media or from just hearing about them. But in what I had learned before I held Joel's piece in my hand, I didn't know much about these 7 people. I just knew the story of how their last few moments came to be. And he said this last night, because his jumping off point was the liturgy of the 7 last words of Jesus, where for those 7 last words, we come face to face with Jesus as a human being. And how powerful that experience is for people of faith. And the music, these 7 short movements, which are so different, each captures something that makes us feel closer to these 7 men. And that, I think, is the beginning of something, that it changes something inside us. And that's why I wanted to bring it, because I thought it could make a positive change in the people who have a chance to hear it. And let me say, Sierra, since you said you want to see it again, Stephen Henkel, our choir director at the Dayton Philharmonic and Chorus, also teaches at the University of Dayton and has a chorale there. And they will be performing the piece, I don't know the exact date, it's in April at the Roger Glass Center. They'll be performing the smaller version of it that's for strings and piano, which is kind of the original version. But you will have another chance, if you like, to hear it in a different setting. And I had asked Stephen if could I sing in that, and then it turned out I'll be out of town that week, getting back in town like right when he's having the dress rehearsal. I thought, no, I'll try to go to the performance, but I won't stand and sing. But so, April 11th. And some of our members from the Dayton Philharmonic and Chorus are also joining with the UD chorale for that. So that would be another opportunity, for the students. I think the UD's not in session this week, is it? Yeah. So otherwise, we probably would have had some of Stephen's students singing singing with us tonight. But so they'll have a chance to live with this piece and present it to their friends and colleagues on campus. So it will keep having an effect.
Would you all join me in thanking our panelists for generously sharing their time, their wisdom, their guidance, their perspective with us tonight. And would you also join me in thanking and recognizing the incredible team at DPAA for their courageous and intentional decision to offer tonight's performance, especially in times such as these. As I said at the outset, these stories are American stories. And as painful as they are, they deserve to be told in hopes that we might one day have no stories such as these to tell. And those aren't my words, those are words that our composer, Joel Thompson, shared with us yesterday. And I felt that they were so important to repeat them here again. That the hope is that one day we won't have to tell these stories anymore. But until we do, it's so important that we platform this work. So important that we tell these stories. And lastly, please give yourselves a hand. please, I promise it's not private. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you for staying for this important discussion. We share this greater Dayton community. We are neighbors, co-workers, and acquaintances, but we don't always take the time to share one another's lived experiences and stories. Tonight, we've been blessed to do something. And for those who are true night owls, we invite you to hang out for a bit longer in the lobby, where DPAA has arranged for complimentary Starbucks coffee, I believe, for all who would like to continue the conversation. Last night, we didn't do a good job of getting out of here, and so, as soon as I say thank you and good night, we want to invite you to make your way to the lobby and we can greet one another and continue the conversation there. But thank you and good night.